I never thought I'd end up in the position I'm in now. A few years ago, I was struggling to make ends meet, working a dead-end job in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. I didn't have a plan, no clear vision, just the desperate need to get out of the rut I found myself in. Now, I run a multi-million-dollar online business that allows me to live anywhere in the world. But looking back, it wasn't a straight path, more like a series of random events that led to the life I have now. It all started when I was working as a cashier at a local grocery store. The pay was terrible, and the hours were even worse. I was stuck in a cycle of working weekends, holidays, and nights, and the most exciting part of my day was the lunch break I got, where I could scroll through my phone and pretend that there was something out there waiting for me. One day, during my shift, I had a conversation with an elderly man who came through my lane. He was a regular, always buying the same things: fresh bread, milk, some fruit, and a few canned goods. We'd exchanged pleasantries many times before, but this time, he looked at me a little differently. "You know, you've got the look of someone who wants more than this," he said, half smiling as he handed me a few bills for his groceries. I laughed it off. "Yeah, don't we all? But you take what you can get, right?" He didn't seem convinced. "The world's full of opportunities if you're brave enough to go after them. Don't wait around for someone to give you a break. You have to create your own." I remember looking at him, skeptical, but I couldn't shake the thought of what he'd said. A few days later, I found myself browsing the internet for business ideas. I had no experience in anything related to business, but the seed had been planted, and I was hungry for change. I spent the next few months learning everything I could. I took free online courses, watched countless YouTube videos, and read everything I could get my hands on. The more I learned, the more I realized I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. But I refused to give up. Every failed attempt was just one more step toward figuring it out. I started with dropshipping. It seemed easy enough: find a product, set up a website, market it on social media, and hope that people would buy it. But reality hit fast. My first website was awful. I remember spending hours making it look professional, only to find that I had set it up all wrong. Then came the marketing, which I had zero experience in. My Facebook ads went nowhere, and the traffic to my site was dismal. I spent more money on ads than I made from sales, and I quickly realized I had a lot to learn. But I didn't quit. Instead of feeling defeated, I took a different approach. I reached out to people who had been successful in the same space and asked for advice. Surprisingly, most of them were willing to share their knowledge. One mentor told me to stop focusing on the product and start focusing on the customer. That shifted everything for me. I began researching my target audience more thoroughly, understanding what they wanted, what problems they were trying to solve, and how I could help them. I also realized I wasn't using the right platforms to reach my audience, so I shifted my marketing focus to Instagram and TikTok. It made a huge difference. By the time I made my first sale, I was on cloud 9. I had been working at it for months, but it all came together in that one moment. Over the next few months, I refined my process, added more products, and kept experimenting with marketing strategies. Slowly but surely, the business began to grow. But even as I saw a trickle of profits coming in, I knew that it wasn't enough to quit my day job just yet. I continued working at the grocery store for another year while building my online business. The balancing act was exhausting, but I knew it was temporary. Every free moment I had, I was either working on my website or learning something new about online marketing. Eventually, the day came when I was making more money from my online business than from my cashier job. It was a huge decision, but I finally gave my 2 weeks' notice. It was terrifying, but also incredibly liberating. The first year of being a full-time entrepreneur was the hardest. There were days when I questioned everything, especially when I had setbacks. One of my biggest challenges came when I was hit with a major return request from a batch of products that didn't meet quality standards. I had to refund a large portion of my profits, and I was back to square one. It felt like I was constantly fighting to stay afloat, but I knew I couldn't give up now. I started creating systems and automating parts of my business. I hired a small team to help with customer service and fulfillment, which allowed me to focus more on the strategic side of things. Slowly, things started to stabilize. The products that I was selling were gaining traction, and customer reviews were pouring in. One of the best decisions I made was to invest in improving my website, making it more user-friendly and mobile responsive. That alone boosted my conversion rates. Over the next few years, my business continued to grow, and I eventually expanded into creating my own products. This was a huge turning point. No longer relying on third-party suppliers allowed me to control the quality of what I sold, and my brand became more recognized. People started to trust me, and I became known in my niche. That's when the big partnerships started rolling in. I began collaborating with influencers and brands that complemented my products. Those partnerships boosted my business to a level I couldn't have imagined back when I was a cashier. Now, I don't just run an online store. I have a full-fledged business with multiple revenue streams, including a subscription service and online courses teaching others how to build their own businesses. My journey hasn't been easy, but every failure, every setback, and every small victory led me here. Today, I live in a city I never thought I could afford to move to. I've traveled to places I only dreamt of visiting, and I'm finally able to give back in ways I never thought possible. The most fulfilling part? I get to teach others who are just like me, struggling to find their way, that it is possible to create a life of freedom and success. I've learned that it's not about waiting for the right opportunity. It's about creating your own opportunities and taking risks when you feel scared. If you're stuck in a dead-end job like I was, or you feel like you're too far behind, just know that it's never too late to start. The journey won't be easy, but it will be worth it. Don't let anyone tell you it's impossible. There's always a way if you're willing to work for it. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I had no idea how much my life was about to change when I decided to take that one leap. It was the kind of decision you only make when you're backed into a corner. The kind of decision where every logical part of you tells you to play it safe, but deep down, you know you can't keep living on the sidelines. I had been stuck in a corporate job for 5 years, working 50-hour weeks, attending endless meetings that had no real impact, and watching my dreams slip further away. It all started in 2019. I was 28, living in a small, overpriced apartment in downtown Chicago. I had the usual mix of city stress and the excitement of a fast-paced life, but honestly, it was getting suffocating. My job in a large tech company paid well, but every day I felt like I was wasting my potential. I had studied business in college, and my dream was always to build something of my own. But like many, I got caught in the safety net of a stable paycheck. I knew I wasn't the only one who felt this way. I heard my colleagues talk about their side gigs, their small business ideas, but none of us ever did anything about it. Then one day, I was sitting in a coffee shop, scrolling through Reddit, when I came across a post that changed everything. The post was about a guy who had quit his 9-to-5 job to pursue his passion for selling custom phone cases. At first, it seemed like a ridiculous idea, but the more I read, the more it made sense. He had started small, just like me, with a few $100 in savings. And after months of trial and error, his business took off. His post wasn't a flashy, I made it kind of story. It was real. He shared the grind, the failures, and the small wins that led to his success. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how I was living a life I didn't want. I could have the same success if I just took action. I didn't have $1 million idea, but I knew I could hustle. I decided then and there that I was going to quit my job and start my own business. But the next few weeks were filled with doubt. My friends and family didn't understand. They thought I was crazy, and honestly, I felt crazy too. I had no idea what kind of business I wanted to start, but I knew I had to try. I didn't have a ton of savings, but I had enough to get started. I decided to venture into e-commerce because it seemed like the most accessible option. I figured I could start with something low risk and low investment. I had always been interested in fitness, so I thought, why not sell fitness products online? I didn't know much about dropshipping, but I quickly learned it was a popular model for beginners. The idea was simple. I would create a website, find suppliers, and sell their products without needing to stock inventory. So, I spent the next few months learning everything I could. I watched YouTube tutorials, read blog posts, and followed anyone who was doing e-commerce successfully. I learned about product research, creating an online store, digital marketing, and customer service. It wasn't easy, and I hit a lot of dead ends. But I was persistent. I was spending evenings after my 9-to-5 job working on my store, putting in the hours that I was missing at my corporate job. After about 2 months, I finally launched my store. I had a few products up, and I had spent money on Facebook ads to get the word out. My first sale came about 2 days after launching. I remember the feeling so clearly. My heart raced as the notification popped up. I had made $27.98. It wasn't much, but it was enough to show me that it was possible. My first customer, a complete stranger, had trusted me enough to make a purchase. I was hooked. But then, reality hit. The first few weeks were a struggle. I didn't make enough to cover the cost of the ads, and I felt like I was constantly throwing money into a black hole. My sales were inconsistent, and I wasn't seeing the return I had hoped for. I was down to my last few $100s when I decided to make a change. I went back to basics and started focusing on the customer experience. I started responding to every email personally, offering better customer support, and offering discounts to those who left reviews. Slowly but surely, I started building a loyal customer base. By the end of my first year, I had made enough money to quit my job. I was still far from successful, but I had created something real. I didn't have to wake up early for a soul-sucking commute anymore. I was my own boss, working from my small apartment with a laptop. It was the best feeling in the world. In the following months, I kept growing the business. I reinvested everything I made back into the store, better ads, more products, better packaging. I started to find products that really resonated with my audience, and I focused on building a brand. I remember the day I hit my first $10,000 month. I had to double-check my bank account to make sure I wasn't seeing things. From there, things began to snowball. The more I invested in my business, the more it grew. By 2022, my store was pulling in 6 figures a year, and I had hired a small team to help me scale further. Fast forward to 2024, and I'm now running a successful e-commerce brand with multiple streams of revenue. I'm still working from home, but it's a different home, one that I bought with the success of my business. I've traveled more in the past 2 years than I did in the previous 28 years of my life. I've been able to give back to charities that I believe in, and I'm more financially independent than I ever thought possible. Looking back, I see that every obstacle I faced was just a lesson in disguise. The late nights, the moments of doubt, the feeling of being stuck, it was all part of the process. It wasn't easy, but I'm proud of where I am today. If I had stayed in my corporate job, I'd probably still be feeling unfulfilled and stuck. But by taking that one chance, I not only changed my life, but also proved to myself that anything is possible if you're willing to put in the work. And to anyone who's thinking about taking that leap, my advice is simple. Start now. Don't wait for the perfect moment or for everything to line up. The best time to start is always right now. You don't need a groundbreaking idea to succeed. You just need to be willing to learn, grow, and persevere. I've been running my own small business for the past 6 years. It started in a very humble way, just me and an old laptop trying to make ends meet. Looking back, I sometimes still can't believe how far I've come. But it's not the journey that's often talked about, the hustle, the grind, the overnight success stories. It's the struggle, the sacrifices, and the realization that it takes so much more than just hard work to succeed in business. It all started when I was 25. I had just finished college and wasn't sure what direction my life would take. I had spent years studying business, but I wasn't confident enough to pursue a corporate job. I had a job offer straight out of school, but something about the whole 9-to-5 lifestyle didn't sit right with me. I wanted to do something I was passionate about, and for me, that was photography. So, with zero experience in the field but an overwhelming desire to make it work, I decided to give freelance photography a shot. I knew it would be hard, but I had no idea how difficult it truly was. I used my savings to buy a second-hand camera and spent countless nights watching YouTube tutorials and reading photography blogs. I had no portfolio, no clients, and not a single lead, but I pushed forward. At first, it was discouraging. I did some free shoots for friends and family, trying to get my foot in the door. But even that wasn't as easy as I thought. People were skeptical about paying a newbie photographer, and my portfolio remained small. I got frustrated a lot and seriously considered quitting a few times. But every time I felt like giving up, I reminded myself that I was doing what I loved, and sometimes that was the only thing that kept me going. A few months into the grind, I got lucky. One of my free shoots went viral on social media after a friend shared it. It wasn't anything spectacular, just a family portrait session I did in a local park, but it was enough to get me noticed. From that one post, I gained my first paying client. The job wasn't high-paying, but it was a start. I kept pushing forward, taking more jobs, and slowly building my reputation. However, like all businesses, it wasn't just smooth sailing from there. I faced countless obstacles: difficult clients, low pay, inconsistent work, and the constant pressure of staying relevant. But I refused to let it get me down. I hustled day and night to improve my skills, expand my network, and learn the business side of things. About a year in, I realized that my business wasn't growing as fast as I wanted it to. I was stuck in the freelance grind, jumping from one gig to the next with little control over my schedule. That's when I decided to take a leap and try something different, start a photography studio. I saved up the little money I had and rented out a small space downtown. It wasn't much, but it was enough to offer a professional environment to my clients. I was determined to make it work, but I quickly learned that having a physical location came with a whole new set of challenges. Rent, utilities, and equipment costs drained my savings in a matter of months. I started to feel like I was back at square one. My clients weren't enough to cover the bills, and I had to rely on part-time jobs just to keep the business afloat. It felt like I was working double shifts, one as a photographer and another to pay the bills. During this time, I questioned myself a lot. Was this really worth it? Was I ever going to make it? But then, something amazing happened. One of my regular clients who had been booking me for small photo shoots for over a year saw how hard I was working and suggested I take my business online. They said, "You're an amazing photographer, but you need to reach more people. Why not offer online courses or digital products? You've got the skills, why not teach others?" I'd never considered this before, but after some thought, it seemed like a great idea. That was the turning point. I spent the next several months developing an online course, How to Start a Photography Business from Scratch. I poured my heart and soul into it, offering all the knowledge I had gained over the years. I wasn't sure if it would take off, but I was determined to give it my best shot. I launched my course and created a website to sell it. To my surprise, the response was overwhelming. The first few months were slow, but I continued marketing the course through social media and word of mouth. Gradually, more and more people started signing up. I couldn't believe it. I was making passive income while still doing what I loved. It was a game changer. Over the next couple of years, I expanded my business to include additional courses, photography presets, and digital downloads. I was able to hire a small team to help with administrative tasks, and the photography studio became a profitable part of my business as well. I had finally achieved the freedom I was seeking when I first started out. My business wasn't just a side hustle anymore. It was a full-fledged, sustainable company. The thing that kept me going all these years wasn't the money, wasn't the fame, and wasn't even the success. It was the constant reminder that I was living my dream. I was doing something I loved every single day, and that's something I wouldn't trade for anything. The road was long, and there were plenty of bumps along the way. But what I've learned is that success doesn't happen overnight. It's not a linear path. There are ups and downs, highs and lows. The key is to keep going, even when it feels impossible. You don't need to have all the answers from the beginning. Just take the next step and trust that it will lead you somewhere. Today, I'm in a place I never thought was possible. I'm not a millionaire, but I'm making a comfortable living, doing something that excites me every day. I get to teach others how to turn their passion into a business, and I get to be the photographer I always dreamed of becoming. Looking back, I can see that every challenge, every moment of doubt, and every failure was a necessary part of the journey. Starting a business is tough, but it's the most rewarding thing I've ever done. If there's one piece of advice I can give to anyone starting out, it's this: don't give up. Keep moving forward. The grind is real, but so is the payoff. I never thought I'd be here, sitting in a luxury office with a panoramic view of the city, managing a company with a six-figure monthly revenue. But here I am. I'm a self-made entrepreneur, and my journey has been anything but ordinary. It all started about 5 years ago. I was 24, working as a project manager at a mid-sized tech company. I wasn't unhappy, but I felt like I wasn't living up to my potential. I was comfortable, and that was the problem. The idea of being in a cubicle forever, climbing the corporate ladder one step at a time, felt suffocating. Every day, I woke up feeling like I was doing the same thing as yesterday, with no real passion or direction. But everything changed when I read a single blog post about entrepreneurship. The writer talked about how much freedom owning a business could give you, how it wasn't just about money, but about being in control of your own destiny. That night, I couldn't sleep. I spent hours reading articles, watching YouTube videos, and listening to podcasts about starting a business. I was hooked. The next morning, I woke up with a burning desire to start my own business. I didn't know what exactly it would be yet, but I was determined. I spent my free time brainstorming ideas, trying to find something I was passionate about. At first, I thought about starting an app, but the market was already saturated with tech solutions. Then, I considered launching a physical product, but the upfront costs seemed daunting. Finally, after weeks of research and reflection, I settled on a digital service. I would start a marketing agency that helped small businesses build their online presence. I wasn't a marketing expert, at least, not yet. But I knew the basics of digital marketing, SEO, social media, content creation. What I lacked in technical skills, I made up for with sheer determination. I bought a few online courses, spent weekends learning everything I could, and started applying for freelance jobs to build my portfolio. It wasn't easy. For the first few months, I barely made enough to cover my rent. My friends thought I was crazy. "You have a stable job. Why risk it?" they'd say. But I knew I couldn't go back. I was already in too deep. In the beginning, I worked tirelessly nights, weekends, whenever I had free time. I reached out to small businesses in my area, offering them free consultations in exchange for testimonials. Slowly but surely, I started building a client base. My first paying client was a local gym. They didn't have a strong online presence, and I offered to help them with their social media and website optimization. After a month of working together, their online traffic doubled, and they were thrilled with the results. I had proven my value. At that point, I knew I could do this. I had the skills, the hustle, and the drive. But I still faced the challenge of scaling. I was a one-man operation, juggling everything: sales, marketing, client work, finances. It was overwhelming. I realized that in order to grow, I'd need to hire help. I made my first hire 6 months in, a virtual assistant who handled administrative tasks. This was a game changer. With my newfound time, I could focus more on client work and growing the business. But hiring the VA also meant I had to bring in more clients to cover the cost. The pressure was on. Around this time, I started experimenting with paid ads. I knew the power of Facebook and Google ads, so I began running campaigns to attract new clients. I wasn't making much profit at first, but I was learning how to optimize my ads, test different creatives, and target the right audience. Slowly, the leads started rolling in. By the time my business hit its first year, I had 5 clients and was making a comfortable income. But I didn't stop there. I reinvested everything back into the business, hiring more team members, upgrading software, and expanding my services. I realized that marketing wasn't just about selling. It was about providing real value to clients and helping them grow. So, I started offering content creation and web design services alongside social media management and SEO. With a full team in place and a steady stream of clients, my agency started growing rapidly. I could see the potential. In the second year, I reached 6 figures in revenue. I was working with brands in various industries: e-commerce, health and wellness, technology, and even local restaurants. The more clients I worked with, the more confident I became. I began to implement new strategies, develop processes, and hire specialists to take on more complex tasks. Then came the big breakthrough. I landed a contract with a fast-growing e-commerce brand. They were looking for a marketing agency to manage their entire digital strategy. This was a huge deal for me. I spent weeks preparing the pitch, offering a tailored solution that would improve their SEO, paid ads, and social media presence. When they signed the contract, I knew my business had reached a new level. The e-commerce brand brought in massive revenue, and with it, my agency gained even more credibility. Over the next year, I scaled the business to a point where we had a full-time team of 15 people, including designers, copywriters, social media managers, and SEO specialists. We had a system in place, and things were running smoothly. I was now the CEO of a growing business, managing a team and working with high-profile clients. But even with success, there were still challenges. The biggest one? Managing work-life balance. I was constantly thinking about the business, checking emails, and strategizing. There were times when I felt overwhelmed and disconnected from my personal life. But I knew that in order to scale even further, I needed to step back and focus on the bigger picture. So, I started delegating more and giving my team more autonomy. I trusted them, and it paid off. Now, looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. I'm no longer just a project manager in a cubicle. I'm the owner of a thriving digital marketing agency. I still face challenges, but I've learned to embrace them. The key to my success wasn't a big breakthrough. It was consistency, reinvesting in my business, and never giving up, even when things seemed impossible. I didn't do it alone. My team is incredible, and their expertise has allowed me to focus on growing the business in ways I never thought possible. Together, we've built something bigger than just a business. We've created a community of people who believe in the power of hard work, dedication, and helping others succeed. It hasn't been easy, but I wouldn't change a thing. Every late night, every risk, and every setback has been worth it. If you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Start small, work hard, and never stop learning. The journey will be tough, but the reward is worth it. I've come to realize that success isn't about reaching the destination. It's about the growth that happens along the way. And I'm just getting started. I always knew I was different. From a young age, I was the kid who would rather hustle on the side than play video games or watch TV. While my friends were spending their time on the latest trends or hanging out, I was reading books about business, watching documentaries on entrepreneurship, and brainstorming ways I could start a venture. The idea of building something from scratch, growing it into something substantial, and becoming my own boss felt like the ultimate goal. I grew up in a modest family in a small town where the idea of starting a business wasn't common. My parents worked hard, and while they were supportive, they never really understood my obsession with starting something of my own. They always told me to get a good job, be secure, and live a safe life. I listened to them, for the most part, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was destined for something bigger. In high school, I started my first venture, a small custom t-shirt printing business. It wasn't much, but it taught me some invaluable lessons. I learned the importance of marketing, customer service, and managing finances. Even though the business barely made enough to cover the costs of the equipment, I was hooked. I loved the process of turning an idea into reality, even if that reality was only a few dollars of profit. After high school, I went to college, partly to appease my parents, but also because I wasn't ready to give up on the idea of learning more. I was studying business, but I found that most of my classes didn't teach me what I really wanted to know. I learned more from talking to professors and networking with local entrepreneurs than I did from the textbooks. I began to take on small freelance gigs to help fund my side projects. I was building websites, designing logos, and doing marketing consulting. Every dollar I made went back into new projects or saved for the next big idea. By the time I graduated, I was 100% sure of one thing. I didn't want to work for anyone else. I didn't want to be stuck in a cubicle doing the same thing every day. So, I made the decision to jump in with both feet, even though I didn't have much to show for it at the time. I launched my first real business, an online store that sold eco-friendly products. I had always been passionate about sustainability, and I thought it was the perfect niche to dive into. The problem? I had no idea how to actually run a business. I had the idea, the drive, but the practical skills were lacking. I started small, selling a few items here and there, but the first year was a struggle. I spent a lot of time learning about e-commerce, supply chains, digital marketing, and everything in between. I read blogs, listened to podcasts, and watched YouTube tutorials. I made mistakes, tons of them, but each one taught me something crucial. The turning point came after a year of slow growth. I had learned the hard way that it wasn't enough to have a good product. You needed a brand. So, I spent a few months rebranding the entire business. I updated the website, streamlined the product offerings, and started creating content on social media. The new brand spoke to a different kind of customer, one that cared about the planet, but also wanted products that were functional, stylish, and affordable. It wasn't an overnight success, but slowly and steadily, the sales began to pick up. The first few months of profit felt like a huge victory, and I reinvested every penny into scaling the business. I hired a small team to help with customer service, inventory, and marketing. I was still wearing a ton of hats, but I was getting better at it. Slowly, I began to automate systems, implement better software for tracking, and even outsource some tasks that were bogging me down. As my business grew, I started facing new challenges. The first one was that I was competing in an increasingly crowded market. There were hundreds of eco-friendly stores popping up everywhere. How could I stand out? The answer was simple: innovation. I started collaborating with artists and influencers in the eco-conscious space. We created limited edition products that were only available through exclusive collaborations. These limited runs built excitement, and our customer base began to grow exponentially. By year 3, I was doing things I had never imagined. I had a warehouse, a larger team, and my brand was recognized within the eco-friendly community. But the growth wasn't without growing pains. The more successful the business became, the more I realized I had to delegate. I had to let go of certain tasks that I used to micromanage, and that wasn't easy. But learning to trust my team and let go of control was key to scaling the business. By year 5, my company was generating millions of dollars in revenue. I had multiple product lines, a strong presence on social media, and an email list of over 100,000 subscribers. But I wasn't satisfied. I knew I could do more. I wanted to scale even further, and I wanted to make a real impact in the sustainability space. So, I began diversifying. I started investing in other companies, primarily in the eco-friendly space. I also created a foundation that helped small businesses get started with sustainable practices. The more I learned, the more I realized that sustainability wasn't just about selling products. It was about creating a culture, an ecosystem where businesses, individuals, and communities could thrive together. By now, I had started getting a lot of media attention. I was being invited to talk at conferences, interviewed by major publications, and featured in podcasts. I had achieved a level of success I had once only dreamed of. But even with all of that, I never forgot the lessons I learned from my first business. That growth takes time, that failures are part of the journey, and that the key to long-term success is staying adaptable. What struck me the most was how many people came to me for advice. Young entrepreneurs, eager to start their own businesses, wanted to know how I did it. I started mentoring them, offering insights on everything from product development to marketing strategies. I wanted to give back to the community that had helped me get to where I was. The entire journey was a roller coaster, but it was the best decision I ever made. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come, from a small-town kid with a dream to running a thriving business that's helping to change the world. But I'm not stopping here. My mission now is to continue scaling, to continue innovating, and to continue inspiring others to take the leap and create something meaningful. The story of my entrepreneurial journey is proof that with enough passion, resilience, and a willingness to learn from mistakes, anyone can go from zero to something amazing. And if I can do it, so can you. I was 22 years old, broke, and living in my parents' basement. My college degree in business management felt like a joke, and the weight of student loans was something I tried not to think about. My dream was to run my own business, but at that point, it felt about as far away as Mars. I had no connections, no investors, and no clear idea of what I was doing. But I had one thing: determination. The idea came to me when I was scrolling through social media late one night, trying to distract myself from the reality of my situation. I saw an ad for a subscription box service. You know, those monthly delivery services where you get a surprise selection of products tailored to your interests. This one, however, was for fitness gear. It made me think, why not try that, but with a twist? At the time, fitness was booming. Everyone was into health. Personal trainers were becoming influencers, and gyms were opening everywhere. Why not curate a box with everything you'd need for a personalized fitness journey? But instead of just sending random items, I could make it tailored to each customer's specific needs. A fitness box that wasn't generic, but truly helpful. I had no experience in the fitness industry, no product suppliers, and a tiny budget, but I was hungry. I spent weeks researching and reached out to local suppliers to create a partnership. I told them about my vision, and to my surprise, many were open to the idea of working with a new business. They offered me a chance to buy their products wholesale, and that was my first big break. I decided to bootstrap the entire operation. My savings were minimal, but I scrimped and saved for months, eventually getting enough to buy a small inventory of fitness gear. Dumbbells, yoga mats, resistance bands, protein powder. I bought as much as I could afford. I created a simple website with Shopify, designed some basic branding on Canva, and set up a subscription model. I wasn't expecting much. Honestly, I was just hoping to break even. I remember the first month like it was yesterday. I didn't sleep much. I spent every waking hour managing my website, fulfilling orders by hand, and figuring out how to market my product. Social media was my go-to tool. I didn't have money for ads, so I relied on organic reach. I created Instagram and TikTok accounts, posting content daily, showing off the products, and sharing my journey. At first, it was slow. I remember thinking, why is nobody buying? My sales were almost non-existent. I'd get a sale here and there, and then there'd be weeks without a single purchase. But then something clicked. I figured out that rather than focusing on selling just a product, I needed to sell a lifestyle, a transformation. I started sharing my personal fitness journey. I showed my struggles with motivation, my ups and downs with eating right, and my desire to live a healthier life. Slowly, people started connecting with me. They weren't just buying fitness products, they were buying into my story. I wasn't just another random brand. I was a relatable person. By the end of the second month, I had managed to double my sales. I still wasn't making much money, but it was a sign that my effort wasn't in vain. I continued to build on that momentum, reaching out to fitness influencers and offering them free boxes in exchange for a shout-out. That was a game changer. Some of them posted about my box, and suddenly I had a new wave of customers. The sales were small at first, but I noticed a trend. People who tried my box were signing up for multiple months. They weren't just buying once, they were subscribing. It was at this point that I knew I had something. I could scale this. But scaling meant investing more money, and that was scary. My savings were running low, and I had maxed out every credit card I owned to fund my business. But I took the leap. I reinvested every single penny I made back into the business. I rented a small warehouse space, hired a few employees to help with fulfillment, and hired a part-time marketer to help with social media. Things were finally looking up. Over the next year, I expanded my product offerings, partnered with fitness experts to curate personalized workout and nutrition plans, and launched a mobile app for subscribers to track their progress. But I still didn't take out a loan or raise outside investment. Everything I did was based on cash flow and taking calculated risks. The turning point came about 18 months after I first launched. I received a message from a major fitness brand asking if I'd be interested in a partnership. They'd been following my journey and were impressed by how I'd built a business from scratch. It was a huge opportunity, but I was nervous. Partnering with a big brand would mean giving up some control over my company. But in the end, I realized that it was the chance to take my business to the next level. I signed the partnership agreement, and they helped me get access to high-quality products and distribution channels that I couldn't have reached on my own. Fast forward to today, and I'm running a multi-million-dollar company. We're now one of the leading fitness subscription boxes, offering personalized products to customers all around the world. We've expanded into fitness apparel, health supplements, and even launched our own fitness podcast. What started in my parents' basement with a few $1,000s in savings is now a full-fledged business with 50 employees, multiple investors, and partnerships with top fitness brands. It's been a roller coaster, and there have been moments when I thought about giving up, but every setback only fueled my determination. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. If someone had told me 5 years ago that I'd be here today, I wouldn't have believed them. The road wasn't easy, and I made plenty of mistakes along the way. But each mistake was a lesson, and every step forward was worth it. I've learned that persistence is key, that failure is just a lesson in disguise, and that building something from the ground up takes time, effort, and a whole lot of grit. I'm living proof that if you believe in your idea, stay consistent, and take risks, you can turn nothing into something amazing. I started my first business when I was 19, and at the time, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I was in college, studying business administration, and I felt that starting my own company was the best way to prove that I was destined to be successful. I thought I had all the right ideas, passion, drive, and enough textbook knowledge to make it work. But there's a world of difference between theory and reality. It all began with a small e-commerce store. I was selling custom t-shirts, mugs, and other merchandise related to a niche fandom I was a part of. It was a community I felt passionate about, so I figured, why not combine my love for it with a potential business? I didn't have a lot of money to start with, so I used the little savings I had from part-time jobs and the money I borrowed from my parents to get started. I built a basic website, designed some logos, and opened a store on a platform that allowed me to create the designs on demand. The first few months were rough. The excitement I had about the idea began to fade as I realized just how hard it was to actually make sales. I spent hours on social media trying to grow my presence, posting memes, and engaging with the community in an attempt to get people to buy something. But no one was buying. It was disheartening. I would go to bed every night wondering if I had made a huge mistake, doubting my skills, and questioning if I was cut out for entrepreneurship. After 6 months of struggling to make any significant sales, I was at a crossroads. I had spent hours creating content, promoting my brand, and trying to figure out what was wrong. But nothing was clicking. I had to face it. The business wasn't working. I didn't have the money to keep running it, and my time was being drained. It was a hard pill to swallow, but I decided to close the store. I deleted the website, canceled the domain, and walked away with nothing but a bruised ego and a few lessons learned. It was tough, but I didn't give up on the idea of being an entrepreneur. I just realized that I needed a different approach. Over the next year, I reflected on what went wrong. One of the main things I realized was that I hadn't focused on building a real audience before launching my store. I had just assumed that people would buy from me because I was passionate about the products. I had no real strategy for customer acquisition, and my marketing efforts were lackluster at best. But more importantly, I hadn't done enough research. I hadn't really understood the market I was trying to tap into. I started to educate myself more seriously about business. I read books, attended seminars, and listened to podcasts. I learned about customer personas, product market fit, and digital marketing. I got better at understanding data and analytics, which I had previously ignored. With my newfound knowledge, I felt ready to give it another shot. This time, I chose a different niche. Instead of focusing on a fan base, I decided to build a brand that could appeal to a broader audience. I launched a subscription box service, something that was gaining traction in the market. I created a unique offering, a monthly curated box with eco-friendly, sustainable products. The idea was simple. People would receive a box filled with eco-friendly products from small businesses that they could use in their daily lives. The market was there, and it was growing. I used everything I had learned in the past year to approach this new venture differently. First, I spent a lot of time building my audience. I engaged with potential customers on social media and through email newsletters, sharing useful content about sustainable living and eco-friendly practices. I created a blog where I talked about how to reduce waste and live a more sustainable lifestyle. Over time, people began to trust my brand. They felt that I was offering them value beyond just the products. When I finally launched my subscription box, I wasn't nervous. I knew I had done the work. I had a strategy. I had spent months nurturing my audience, understanding what they wanted, and tailoring my offerings to meet their needs. I also had a great product that resonated with them. The launch was a success. I made sales right out of the gate. It was a small victory, but it was enough to make me believe in myself again. As the months went by, I learned how to scale the business. I invested in better marketing strategies, optimizing my website, and increasing my online presence. The subscriber base grew steadily, and I started making enough money to reinvest in the business. The first year was challenging, but I had built a foundation. The second year was when everything started to snowball. I began to partner with larger companies to feature their products in my boxes, which gave me credibility and exposure. I started outsourcing tasks to free up my time and focus on scaling. By the third year, the business had become profitable enough that I could finally quit my day job. I was working full-time on my company, which was a dream come true, but it wasn't without its challenges. There were months where cash flow was tight, and I had to make hard decisions about where to invest my limited resources. There were moments when I doubted myself, wondering if the success I had achieved so far was just a fluke. But despite the ups and downs, I never gave up. I continued to iterate, experiment, and improve. I kept listening to my customers, improving my offerings, and constantly seeking ways to optimize my operations. After 5 years of hard work, the business was thriving. I had built something sustainable, something that I was proud of. I even started a podcast to help other entrepreneurs who were just starting out, something that was incredibly fulfilling. Looking back, I see how much I've grown as both a business owner and a person. I had to learn how to fail, how to get up when I was knocked down, and how to trust the process. There are no shortcuts in business, and success doesn't come overnight. It takes grit, resilience, and the willingness to learn from your mistakes. Now, I'm in a place where I'm not just running a business. I'm building a brand that people care about. I'm able to give back to the community through charity partnerships and help other entrepreneurs who are looking to make their mark. It's been an incredible journey, and I wouldn't trade the hard times for anything. If there's one thing I've learned from my experience, it's that entrepreneurship is a marathon, not a sprint. Success doesn't happen because you have the best idea or because you're the hardest worker. It happens when you're able to keep moving forward, even when it feels like everything is falling apart. I'm now 28, and while my business is still growing and evolving, I can say that I've reached a point where I'm proud of what I've accomplished. But more than that, I've learned the true value of perseverance, resilience, and patience. It's these lessons that have truly made all the difference, and they're the reason why I'm still in business today. I was 27, jobless, $42,000 in credit card debt, and sleeping on an air mattress in the corner of my cousin's living room. I had 2 shirts that didn't have holes, and I was ghosting my student loan servicer like they were an ex who'd cheated on me. My degree was in anthropology, which had exactly 0 practical applications, unless I was planning on analyzing the economic behavior of failed job applicants. I had no connections, no money, and a lot of bad decisions behind me. And somehow, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. The pivot point was a pizza. That sounds ridiculous, I know. But it's true. One afternoon, while wallowing in a particularly deep pit of self-pity, I ordered a $6 pepperoni pizza using the last $9 I had in my checking account. I don't even know why. Maybe I wanted to taste something warm that day. It arrived cold, greasy, and undercooked. I was furious, not because the pizza was bad, but because even my act of financial irresponsibility had let me down. So I snapped a picture of the sad slice, opened a fake email account, and sent a complaint to the corporate HQ of the chain that made it. I didn't expect anything to come from it, but they responded quickly, apologized, and offered me a $10 voucher. That sparked an idea, not a noble one at first, just a desperate, broke one. What if I got vouchers from multiple fast food chains by sending in complaints? That week, I reviewed about 15 different restaurants based on past experiences or, let's be honest, slightly exaggerated grievances. I crafted polite, reasonable complaints, usually about cold food, long wait times, or incorrect orders. I wasn't rude or outlandish. About 10 out of 15 responded positively. I netted roughly $90 in vouchers. So I ate for free for a couple of weeks. But then a strange thing happened. I started wondering how the system worked. Why do these chains refund food with vouchers so quickly? How do they track complaints? Do they lose money doing this? I began researching the business side of franchises. It turns out a lot of them outsource their customer service. There are even specialized companies that track and respond to complaints on behalf of huge chains. Some smaller chains don't have a system at all. That gap gave me an idea. What if I started a service that helped small restaurants handle customer feedback, both complaints and compliments, in a streamlined, professional way? The idea simmered for a while. I didn't have a computer of my own, so I used the library. I spent 2 months learning the basics of CRM, customer relationship management, built a rudimentary website using a free trial of Squarespace, and called the company TableTalk. The pitch was simple. TableTalk would act as a virtual front desk for restaurants to process and respond to customer feedback. For $29/month, small restaurant owners could subscribe, get a branded email account, and have their customer complaints routed through our system. We would draft responses based on templates and make sure each message was courteous, consistent, and timely. For $59/month, we offered analytics, summaries of feedback trends, and suggestions for improvement. I cold emailed about 300 restaurants. 280 ignored me. 10 told me to buzz off. But 10 said yes. $290 a month. It was barely enough to cover gas and my cousin's couch rental fee, which had become official after month 3. But it was a start. I used that money to upgrade from free tools to more professional ones. I hired a freelance graphic designer to make the site look legit. I learned how to automate the email flow using Zapier and MailChimp. I also made the biggest move of all. I started showing up at restaurants in person. This was the game changer. When I stood in their lobbies and explained the value of TableTalk, the owners listened. I wasn't just some random dude behind an email anymore. I was someone who understood how a 1-star Yelp review could tank a week's business. I wore a blazer from Goodwill and printed business cards at FedEx. I made myself look bigger than I was. Within 6 months, I had 87 paying clients. I left my cousin's apartment and got a room in a shared house. I bought a used laptop. I even paid off one of my smaller credit cards. But more importantly, I started building a team. My first hire was a mom from Florida I found on a remote workboard. She was fast, polite, and had a background in hospitality. Then I brought in a tech-savvy college kid to help me scale the dashboard and create a more automated backend. By the end of the first year, we had 310 active clients and were making just over $15,000/month in revenue. The second year, we added features, review monitoring, read time alerts, even sentiment analysis using basic machine learning tools. I wasn't technical, but I knew how to ask the right people for help. By the end of year 2, we were clearing $38,000/month. I had paid off all my debt. I started turning down investor offers. This was a lifestyle business now, and I liked it that way. But the biggest moment came when a franchise consultant approached me and said one of his clients, a chain of 140 sushi restaurants, wanted to license our platform internally. They didn't want to subscribe. They wanted to own a white-labeled version of it. We negotiated. They paid $210,000 for a 2-year exclusive license. That was more than I'd made in the first 18 months combined. Last year, Table Talk hit $1.2 million in revenue. We're still small, 9 full-time employees, all remote. I still work out of a co-working space with free coffee and 2 mini inspirational posters. But I don't live on an air mattress anymore. I don't pretend to be someone I'm not. I'm just a guy who used a crappy pizza to stumble into a business. And for the record, I haven't eaten at that pizza chain since. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. 3 years ago, I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment with no heat, $218 in my checking account, and a degree I never used. Today, I run a 7-figure e-commerce business selling a product I initially created with $87 and some leftover felt from my mom's craft room. Let me back up. I was 29, laid off for the second time in 2 years, and trying to stay afloat freelancing. I had an English degree, had worked as a copywriter, and hated every second of corporate life. I wasn't passionate about anything except not being broke. My life was a cycle of side gigs, ramen, and avoiding my student loan emails. Then one day, I babysat my sister's 3 kids while she and her husband went out for their anniversary. Her youngest, Lucy, 4 years old and a certified tornado, kept losing her stuffed animals during our living room campout. Every 10 minutes, she'd cry because she couldn't find her sleep buddies. After the 3rd meltdown, I grabbed an old pillowcase, sewed some pouches into it, badly, and stitched it shut like a kangaroo pouch blanket. All her toys could fit inside. She loved it. A week later, my sister called and said Lucy hadn't gone to bed without the animal blanket since. She joked that I should make more of them and sell them. I laughed it off, but something about it stuck in my head. I didn't have a business background. I didn't have money. But I had time, a sewing machine I inherited from my grandmother, and an idea. I scavenged thrift stores for fabric, cut up a few old bedsheets, and made 5 more buddy blankets. I posted them on Etsy under the name Sleepy Pals. I priced them at $29.99, completely guessing. Nothing happened for a week. Then I got 1 sale. Then 2. Then none for 10 days. I was about to delete the shop when a parenting blogger with 20K followers DM'd me. She bought one for her daughter and posted about it. I had 40 sales that week. From there, I was all in. I skipped rent, not a great idea, took a $500 cash advance on my credit card, and bought fabric in bulk. I watched YouTube videos on sewing, branding, shipping. I made a website on Shopify that looked terrible, but it worked. My apartment became a sweatshop. I sewed until 3 a.m. most nights. I burned myself with a hot glue gun more times than I want to admit. My back hurt constantly. But by month 3, I had cleared $3,000 profit. More than I'd ever made writing articles for $15 a pop. At this point, I knew I had something real. I reached out to a local single mom Facebook group and offered to pay $10 per blanket to anyone who could sew to help me fulfill orders. I got 5 women who were faster and better than me within 2 weeks. My team was born. My biggest break came when I started running TikTok videos of cute kids putting their toys into the blankets. One video of a toddler shouting, "All my friends go night-night," hit 600K views. Sales exploded. We hit $25K that month. I upgraded our materials, hired a graphic designer on Fiverr to redo the logo, and started sending out free samples to parenting influencers. Not all responded, but the ones who did converted. By year 1, we had our first holiday rush. I sold 7,000 units in December alone. I cried on the kitchen floor because I couldn't believe it. Here's where things got messy. I got cocky. I decided to launch 2 new products, One was a toy storage beanbag, the other a customizable nightlight. Neither sold. I'd spent nearly $15K developing them. I panicked and nearly took out a loan to keep operations running. Instead, I swallowed my pride and posted a heartfelt update to our customers, explaining what happened, how I overextended, and how we were refocusing on our original mission. The response was overwhelming. Not only did our audience stay loyal, but they shared our store. Sales tripled in February. I streamlined everything. I outsourced sewing to a small local factory. I focused all its spend on the original blanket and 2 new seasonal designs. We built a customer loyalty program, invested in better shipping, and cleaned up our website. By year 2, we hit $1.4 million in revenue. I hired full-time employees. We moved into a 1,200 square foot space that didn't smell like old takeout. I still remember my mom walking into the office and tearing up. She always worried I wouldn't make it. She saw how miserable I was hopping job to job. Seeing her hug a customer service rep who used to be my neighbor's cousin was surreal. But here's the thing I want to be honest about. I still feel like I'm winging it. People message me now asking how to start $1 million business. And I wish I could say it was a spreadsheet or a genius plan. It wasn't. It was a tantrum-prone toddler, a random craft project, and a whole lot of nights questioning if I was a complete idiot. But the truth is, if you can solve a problem people actually have, with a solution they can touch, feel, or understand immediately, you have a business. We're working on licensing deals now. A big box retailer just placed a 10K unit order. I'm hiring a COO. We're expanding into Canada next year. 3 years ago, I was eating instant oatmeal 3 times a day. Now, I employ 14 people, most of whom are parents working part-time hours from home. Sleepy Pals isn't just blankets. It's proof that even a broke, burnt-out nobody can turn one moment of desperation into something that matters. And if you're reading this wondering if your weird idea might be something, try it. Make 5. Post them. Say yes to what scares you. You might be one meltdown away from the best decision of your life. I never meant to become a millionaire. I just wanted to avoid eviction. 3 years ago, I was living in a basement apartment with mold on the ceiling, a leaky pipe under the kitchen sink, and neighbors who held karaoke parties at 3 a.m. Rent was $850, and I had $32 in my checking account the day I got the eviction notice. I had just lost my job at a failing marketing agency. They paid me peanuts and then stopped paying altogether. I wasn't sleeping. I was either scrolling job boards or pitching cold emails for freelance gigs that never replied. On the day of the eviction notice, I sat on the floor, back against the wall, staring at the ceiling while mold flakes crumbled off and landed on my laptop. I did something desperate. I posted on Reddit. Not on r/entrepreneur or anything like that. On r/freelance. Just a basic post. Laid off, evicted, can write and do social media. Any advice? It got buried fast. But one person messaged me. His username was Throwaway in Austin. He told me he ran a Shopify store selling handmade candles, and he needed someone to manage his Instagram, write some product descriptions, and answer customer emails. $400/week flat rate. It felt like a scam. I took it anyway. Turned out, it wasn't a scam. It also turned out the candle guy was a terrible businessman. He made amazing candles. Like really. Soy-based, small batch, weird scents like library leather and rain on brick. His customers loved them. But he had no system. Orders got missed. Emails unanswered. His packaging sucked. His margins were trash. He spent $300 a month on Instagram ads with no tracking setup. I told him this after a week. He asked if I wanted to take over the back end, and he'd just make candles and do lives. I said yes. We wrote a contract on Google Docs. 6 weeks later, I was doing everything except pouring wax. I fixed his Shopify site. I wrote product pages that actually described the scents. I'd met influencers. I built an email list and sent out a restock announcement. We sold out in 48 hours. It was 700 units. Then I did something I shouldn't have. I offered to buy in. I didn't have money, but I told him I'd work for free for 2 months in exchange for 20% equity. He countered with 15%. I said deal. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I was obsessed. I was waking up at 5 a.m. to answer emails and staying up past midnight building our packaging designs in Canva. I created a loyalty program, set up referral links, and started a blog series called The Wax Files. It featured fictional stories behind each scent, like a mystery novel. Sales doubled, then tripled. After month 5, I told him we should start launching limited drops instead of constant restocks. Hype, scarcity, waitlists. He thought I was crazy, but the first drop sold out in 4 hours. Then we made a Halloween drop with a scent called Dead Poets Study. I spent $100 on a moody photo shoot setup using thrift store books, a candle, and an old typewriter I borrowed from my neighbor. That one made $21,000 in one day. It got out of control after that. Influencers started tagging us without being asked. We hit 100,000 followers. A TikTok went viral. We got a DM from an indie boutique chain that wanted wholesale orders. We weren't ready. We were still using a garage in Austin, and the shipping labels were being printed on an inkjet printer that jammed every third try. So I made another move. I offered to buy the whole company. He was burned out. He missed just making candles. I loved the chaos. I took out a $60K personal loan, which my bank advisor told me not to do. He handed me the LLC, and we shook hands in a taco shop. That was 2 years ago. Since then, we've gone from a garage to a 2,500 square foot warehouse. We've got 3 full-time staff and contract out fulfillment. We still make our candles in-house, but now we can produce 10,000 units a month. We've expanded into soaps and diffusers. We just launched our Winter Hauntings line with 3 ghost-themed scents. They sold out in under 48 hours. Last year, we grossed $1.4 million. This year, we're pacing toward $2.1 million. But the money isn't the wild part. The wild part is how small everything felt at the beginning. I used to think businesses started with investors, co-founders, slide decks. I thought you needed a business plan. I thought you needed credentials. But this whole thing started because I said yes to a random DM from a guy in Austin who couldn't keep up with his emails. The difference between being broke and building something wasn't genius. It was saying yes and showing up. I still live cheap. I still keep my overhead low. But I moved out of that basement apartment. I don't miss the mold. I still have the eviction notice, though, folded up in my drawer. Because sometimes, rock bottom is the perfect foundation. And because I never want to forget what desperation taught me, no one is coming to save you. But you might be able to save yourself. Puga__home responded. Said he'd promote a candle if I sent him a free one. I sent him my bestseller, Midnight Forest. He posted a story lighting the candle, tagging me, saying something like, "Smells like a damn luxury hotel." I got 112 orders in 24 hours. I couldn't believe it. I only had 40 candles in stock. I stayed up for 2 straight nights melting wax, pouring, labeling, packing. My cousin thought I was manic. I probably was. I shipped every single one by hand at the local USPS. It was the best feeling of my life. Until 3 days later, when 8 people emailed me saying their candles arrived broken or melted. Turns out, you can't just throw candles in a box and slap a label on it. I learned about proper packaging, bubble wrap, corrugated boxes, thermal-resistant bags, real quick. But I didn't quit. I reinvested everything. I started running TikTok ads, low budget, raw, real stuff like me pouring wax with trending audio behind it. People liked seeing the behind the scenes. A video went viral. Not millions, but enough to bring in another 400 orders. I was still making candles in my cousin's kitchen. Wax was everywhere. The microwave smelled like eucalyptus. Nina banned me from the kitchen after she slipped on a hardened pool of wax and sprained her ankle. That's when I knew I had to move out. I found a tiny sublease in a rough part of town. It was technically a basement apartment, with mold in the corners and spotty Wi-Fi. But it had its own kitchen, and that's all I needed. I set up shop and started making candles full-time. By month 6, I had made $23,000 in profit. Not revenue, profit. I hired my first part-time employee, a neighbor named Jada who had just been laid off from her barista job. I paid her $15/hour to help with packing and inventory. She was a lifesaver. I also started getting repeat customers. That's when things got crazy. One of my customers turned out to be the assistant buyer for a boutique hotel chain. She loved the candle and emailed me asking if I could produce 1,000 units for their winter launch. It was the biggest order of my life. I said yes, then panicked. I didn't have the capacity. I couldn't even store 1,000 candles in my apartment. So I took a risk. I rented a 400 square foot commercial studio space on the edge of town. No AC, but big windows and a sink. It was my new HQ. I worked 16-hour days for 3 weeks. Jada brought in her boyfriend, who brought in his cousin. I paid everyone cash, made every candle by hand, and delivered the order myself in a rented U-Haul. The hotel sent me a thank you note and a second order. That winter, I made $48K. But it wasn't just about the money anymore. For the first time, I felt like I had built something real. My dad, who used to call me a professional underachiever, finally told me he was proud of me. My mom cried when she saw the candles on a shelf in a local store. By year 2, Ember and Ash was on shelves in 17 boutique stores, had 2 full-time employees, and I was paying myself $4K/month. I finally moved out of the basement and got a real apartment with actual sunlight and a dishwasher. But success brought problems, too. A big competitor accused me of copying their scent profile, which I didn't. They sent a cease and desist. I had to hire a lawyer for the first time. That was $2, 800 gone in one shot. Then, a shipment of 500 lids came in warped. My supplier ghosted me. I had to find a new one overseas and wait 3 weeks for replacements. Customers were pissed. I refunded 60 orders out of pocket. I learned hard lessons about supply chains, trademarks, and customer service. But I also learned that I was tougher than I thought. Now, 3 years later, Ember and Ash does about $500K in annual revenue. I have a warehouse, a team of 6, and we just launched a subscription box. I still hand pour the first batch of every new scent, just to keep that connection. Our best seller is still Midnight Forest. Sometimes I think back to that first candle, the one that smoked up the kitchen and made Nina scream. I keep a cracked jar of it on my office shelf, next to the original shipping label with my cousin's address scribbled on it. It reminds me that I didn't start with a plan, or funding, or even confidence. I started with desperation and a half-dead dream. And maybe, sometimes, that's enough. 3 years ago, I was crying in a locked conference room after my 5th investor pitch in one day. I had $36 left in my checking account, 2 employees who hadn't been paid in a month, and a startup idea I believed in more than my own sanity. This is the story of how I built and sold a startup for $4.2 million in 34 months after being ghosted, scammed, and told this is a hobby, not a business, more times than I can count. It started with bagels. I was working as a marketing coordinator at a mid-size insurance firm in Chicago. I hated it. I had a micromanaging boss, and every Monday started with a meeting about why sales weren't high enough, despite the fact that I wasn't in sales. My escape was this tiny weekend side project, a bagel delivery service. Why bagels? Because I lived near a bakery that made the most unreal bagels, but they didn't deliver. I asked the owner if I could deliver for them on weekends for a small cut. They said yes. I set up a basic Shopify site, ran Facebook ads targeting bagel lovers, and made about $300 in profit my first month. It was fun, harmless, but a weird thing happened. One customer emailed me and said, "Could you do this for other bakeries too?" That was my light bulb moment. The next week, I skipped my Monday meeting and drove around the city, pitching other bakeries. By the end of the week, I had 6 bakeries who said they'd be open to offering delivery if I handled the logistics. I built out a slightly better site, rebranded it as Crumb Cart, and asked a friend who delivered pizzas to work part-time doing the deliveries. Within 4 months, Crumb Cart was making $3,000 per month. Not life-changing, but enough that I started dreaming. So I did something dumb. I quit my job. Here's where things got rocky. First, my friend quit on me. Then the bagel bakery closed down for renovations and never reopened. I had 1 month of rent saved and 18 open orders I couldn't fulfill. In desperation, I started doing the deliveries myself, waking up at 4 a.m. to pack pastries, donuts, and bread into my 2009 Honda Civic and speed around the city. That's also when I met Lily. She was a customer who emailed to say her croissants were squished and arrived late. I apologized and offered a refund. She responded, "If you're doing this solo, I'm impressed. Let me buy you a coffee." I met her. She turned out to be a UX designer recently laid off from a fintech startup. She liked my vision. I asked if she'd consider helping redesign the site in exchange for equity. She agreed. We became partners, and it changed everything. We cleaned up the site, added a scheduling tool, and started pitching office managers instead of individuals. That pivot was huge. Offices needed big orders, reliably, and were willing to pay more for consistency. By month 10, we were doing $8,000 per month in recurring revenue and had 3 drivers on contract. Then, disaster number 2. A startup in San Francisco with $12 million in funding launched a nationwide artisan bakery delivery platform. Their site looked 10 times better, their prices were lower, and they raised a Series A the same month we tried to raise a seed round. Every investor we pitched told us we were too small to survive. One said, "You're a lemonade stand trying to compete with Pepsi." I almost gave up, but Lily didn't. She reminded me that big startups have overhead, burn, bureaucracy. We had speed. So we started building features they couldn't implement fast, like bakery inventory syncing, live order status, and carbon-neutral delivery options using e-bike couriers. We also niched harder. They went broad. We went deep. By year 2, we were in 4 cities and pulling $35,000 per month. Not massive, but profitable. Then, during a tech conference, I gave a talk titled, "How to Compete with Giants and Stay Scrappy." A guy approached me after and said, "Your backend is cleaner than most VC-funded logistics startups I've seen. Want to talk?" Turned out he was an exec at a mid-size food tech company looking to acquire niche delivery businesses to expand their footprint. He loved that we owned our customer base, had 82% repeat rate, and had a flexible model. We spent 4 months in negotiations. During that time, I still did deliveries every other Friday because we were short-staffed. I remember pitching our metrics on a Zoom call while my Civics engine was running in the background. Final terms, they acquired Crumbcart for $4.2 million, including a 3-year earnout and 15% stock in their parent company. Lily and I both took salaries to stay on as product leads for 18 months, then exited clean. I paid off my student loans, bought my parents a new roof, took a solo trip to Patagonia, and now I mentor early founders who are still in their civic phase. If I learned anything, it's this: you don't need to be the biggest. Just be the best at a thing someone cares about. And when the world says, "This is cute, but it'll never scale," smile and go deliver your next damn bagel. I started my company because I couldn't find a job. This was back in 2015, a few months after I graduated with a computer science degree from a decent state school. I had a mediocre GPA, 3.1, no internships, and 0 industry connections. The job market wasn't terrible, but I was invisible to recruiters. I sent out maybe 200 applications over 4 months and got ghosted on all but 3. 2 ghosted me after the first interview. The third one told me, and I quote, "We like your personality, but we're looking for someone with more edge." I was living with my mom in suburban Ohio, working the register at a Home Depot. I felt like I was rotting from the inside out. What saved me was a stupid idea and a Craigslist post. See, during college, I used to write little scripts to automate things for myself, downloading YouTube playlists, scraping sites for textbook prices, etc. Nothing fancy, just stuff that saved me time. One day, I was helping my mom figure out her bookkeeping for her part-time Etsy business, and I wrote a Python script that pulled in her sales and auto-generated a summary for her accountant. It took me a couple hours, and she was blown away. She told her knitting group about it. 3 of her friends messaged me. I cleaned up the script, added a simple GUI, and started charging $50 for a basic setup. I posted the service on Craigslist, custom software automation for Etsy/small businesses, save time, reduce stress. I priced it at $100 after the first 10 clients. That was the beginning of Automate Me. At first, it was just me building tiny tools for people, automating spreadsheet work, creating invoice templates, syncing Google Calendar with their order flow, scraping Amazon reviews, whatever. Most clients were moms with small businesses or solopreneurs with no tech experience. I didn't know how to build a company, but I knew how to listen. By month 3, I was making about $2, $500/month. I quit Home Depot. I bought a secondhand ThinkPad and set up a real website. I learned enough JavaScript and PHP to expand what I could offer. By the end of the year, I had made about $37,000 total, not amazing, but more than I'd made in any job. In 2016, I made my first hire. His name was Trevor, a fellow Craigslist hustler who had dropped out of community college and was building Shopify themes for people. We met over coffee, talked about working together, and agreed to split client work 70/30. He billed, I'd sell and handle support. This is the moment things started to change. With Trevor on board, we started saying yes to bigger projects. One client wanted an entire back-end inventory system. Another wanted to automate returns across 3 platforms. We cobbled together duct tape solutions using Google Sheets, Firebase, and a few shady APIs. Word of mouth grew. We incorporated as Automate Me LLC. I learned what an EIN was. I learned how to read a contract. I hired a CPA. I built a Notion dashboard to manage leads, tasks, and revenue. Then came the tipping point. In early 2017, we got an email from a woman named Diana. She ran a small fulfillment company in Missouri and wanted to know if we could build a dashboard that tracked shipments, flagged delays, and integrated with both USPS and UPS tracking systems. She was paying $400/month to some bloated legacy software and hated it. We quoted her $500 for a custom build. She paid within the hour. Then she referred us to 10 of her clients. Over the next 6 months, we pivoted. We stopped calling ourselves a custom automation company and rebranded as Logicore, shipping and fulfillment solutions for small businesses. We standardized the software, added user accounts, built dashboards, and rolled it into a web-based SaaS. I had no idea we were building a startup. I just thought we were getting really good at solving this one problem. By mid-2018, we had 60 paying clients at $49/month. Not enough to get rich, but enough to survive and hire our third dev, Chloe, a college friend who'd been working QA at a big firm and wanted more flexibility. We launched a new version in 2019 and bumped prices to $99/month. Clients didn't blink. We hit $10K MR in March, $20K by November. I was still living in Ohio, in the same house I grew up in, running a growing startup out of a home office with a squeaky ceiling fan. I reinvested almost everything. My car was 12 years old. I didn't take a salary until year 4. Then COVID hit. In March 2020, online commerce exploded. Our clients' businesses doubled overnight. And so did ours. We scaled to $60K MRR by the end of 2020. We got our first inbound investor email in October. I didn't know what a SAFE was and had to Google how to talk to VCs. In 2021, we raised a $500K pre-seed round from a small Midwest fund. We used it to hire a real product designer, add integrations with FedEx and DHL, and clean up our backend. We also made our first big mistake. We tried to go upmarket. We thought we could land medium-sized logistics firms if we added enough enterprise features. We spent 6 months building tools that no one used. The code base bloated. Our team got confused. Existing clients complained. By the time we figured it out, we had churned 20% of our base. Lesson learned. Serve the customers who already love you. We went back to basics. I started doing customer support again. We simplified the dashboard. We slashed prices for long-term clients. Growth returned. Today, it's 2025. We're at $180K MRR, 14 people full-time, fully remote. We never raised again. I still don't think of myself as a CEO. I'm just a guy who couldn't get a job and learned to listen to people's problems. If you're stuck, or broke, or convinced you missed your shot, I promise you haven't. There's opportunity hiding in the most ordinary corners. Mine was in a spreadsheet my mom couldn't understand. Look for yours. I was 27, broke, and one bad decision away from moving back into my mom's basement. I had just quit my 3rd job in 2 years, each worse than the last. I wasn't stupid. I had a degree in computer science, but I'd been chasing fast money and freelancing gigs, convinced that I'd stumble upon the perfect idea like some kind of savant. Spoiler, I didn't. Then, by complete accident, I found my niche. It started with my friend Jamie, who ran a small vintage clothing shop out of her apartment. She'd spend hours combing thrift stores and flea markets, finding cool pieces, then sell them on Instagram. It was more hobby than hustle, but she had a loyal following of about 10,000. One night over beers, she complained about how annoying it was to manage inventory, answer DMs, take payments, and track shipments all manually. I asked her if she'd pay for a tool that automated all of that. She blinked. Hell yes. If it wasn't expensive. The next morning, hungover but intrigued, I sketched out a rough idea for a platform that would help solo sellers like her manage their entire mini business. DMs, payments, inventory, shipping labels, everything. Without ever leaving Instagram or TikTok. A Shopify Lite for social sellers. I built the first version in 2 weeks. It was clunky as hell, but Jamie used it. She was thrilled. Then she told 3 of her friends. One of them was a beauty influencer with 40K followers who sold handmade lip glosses. When she said, "I need this like yesterday," I knew I was onto something. I named it Loopcart. Dumb name, but the domain was free. Within a month, I had 10 active users and a waitlist of about 50. All of them were micro-influencers or niche sellers who ran their entire business through DMs. Instagram had become a mall, but no one had built a cash register for it. I didn't charge at first. I wanted feedback. I took calls with every user, wrote custom code tweaks for individual pain points, and learned more about the chaos of DM-based sales than I ever wanted to. Here's where things got crazy. One of my early users was a sneaker reseller in Atlanta. He'd flip limited edition drops using raffles in his Instagram stories. He messaged me saying, "Yo, you got any way I can collect entries, payments, and auto-pick winners?" I built a raffle module that weekend. He posted about it in a reseller Discord. My waitlist exploded. 300 signups in 2 days. I still hadn't made a dime, but I was scared to charge because I didn't want to break the momentum. That was mistake number 1. By month 3, I had 1,200 users and 0 revenue. I was covering server costs with a credit card I shouldn't have been using. I finally decided to offer a paid tier, $19 per month for pro tools like raffles, multi-item carts, shipping label integration, etc. 200 people signed up in the first week. I cried. Not metaphorically. Real, stupid tears. It felt like I'd cracked some code I wasn't smart enough to even know existed. But now I had actual customers, and they had real expectations. I couldn't just duct tape features anymore. So I looked for a co-founder. I met Lana in a Twitter thread about creator tools. She was a designer with e-commerce chops, but also a no BS operator. She cleaned up our UI, killed half the features I built, "You're not Amazon," calmed down, and tripled our retention. We made it official 2 weeks later. We got into an early-stage accelerator. They gave us $75,000 for 7%. It felt like selling my soul, but also, ramen gets old fast. Lana and I moved into a co-working space in LA, ran user calls all day, and shipped product at night. By the end of year 1, we had 7,000 users and $28,000 MRR. That doesn't sound like much until you realize that almost all of our users were solo sellers paying monthly. No big contracts, no VC-friendly SaaS whales. Just thousands of tiny businesses stacking up like Legos. Our churn was brutal at first, over 20%. Turns out, people don't always stick with their hustle. Some went viral and outgrew us. Others quit when sales slowed down. But those who stayed loved us. We started building more for them. Better analytics, easier invoicing, even tools to repost viral content. We launched Loop Pay, our own checkout that handled everything end-to-end, and charged a 1.5% fee. It was optional, but 70% of our users adopted it in 3 months. That's when our revenue really started to climb. By year 2, we had 25,000 users, $90,000 MRR, and our first acquisition offer, $2.7 million from a mid-tier social commerce startup. I wanted to take it. Lana laughed. "That's rent money in this game. Let's go bigger." She was right. Instead, we raised a seed round, $1.4 million on a $10 million post-money valuation. I hated the process, but we got decent angels, including one guy who sold his Shopify plugin company for $100 million. He became our mentor and pushed us to think platform, not product. We started integrating with WhatsApp, TikTok Shop, even Discord. Anywhere someone might be trying to sell something but had no tools. Loopcart evolved into Loop, an OS for solo sellers. Catchy, right? Today, 2.5 years in, we're at 80,000 users, $300,000 MRR, and profitable. We're still only 14 people. We turn down meetings with VCs weekly. We might raise again. We might not. Here's what I learned the hard way. 1. People don't want tools. They want results. If your product doesn't feel like magic, they won't pay for it. 2. Charge early. The people who won't pay now won't pay later. Free users give loud feedback, but paying users give real feedback. 3. Simplicity scales. Half of my early features were dead weight. Focus on one thing that makes someone's day 10x easier. 4. Distribution is everything. If Jamie hadn't told her friends, or if that sneaker guy didn't post in his Discord, none of this would have happened. 5. You don't need to be a genius. Just listen better than anyone else and build what you hear. I'm not some unicorn founder. I didn't raise $20 million or sell to Meta. But I built something people actually use every day, and I get to work with people I like, solving problems I understand. And I haven't had to move back in with my mom. That's the real win. I never planned on becoming an entrepreneur. I was 34, broke, and living in a two-bedroom apartment with my pregnant wife, my dog, and way too many broken dreams. I had been laid off from my job at a mid-sized marketing firm after a merger. At first, I thought I'd bounce back quickly. I had a decent resume, some experience, and confidence. But 2 months became 6, then 12. Interviews turned into rejection emails, and eventually, silence. My savings dwindled to almost nothing. My credit cards were maxed. My wife, Amanda, was 6 months pregnant with our first child and working overtime just to cover rent. Desperation has a way of forcing clarity. It was a Tuesday morning. I remember because I'd just burned the last of our coffee, and the silence in the kitchen was crushing. I sat there staring at my laptop when I got a notification. A message from an old college acquaintance on LinkedIn. "Hey man, random question, didn't you once make that viral meme page back in 2014? I have a client trying to go viral. Can you help?" That meme page had been a side hobby. I'd run a Facebook page in the early 2010s that hit 200,000 followers. Nothing serious, just jokes and trends. I'd shut it down years ago when real life took over. But that message hit something in me. "I can help," I replied, with more confidence than I felt. The client turned out to be a local protein bar company trying to build hype before a new product launch. I offered to do some branding work, mock up some meme-style promos, and run an engagement campaign for them. I quoted $500 for 2 weeks of work. They agreed without negotiating. I ran the campaign through a burner Instagram I built overnight. I created memes, weird product reaction videos, and sarcastic influencer takes. Nothing fancy, but within days, the account had over 5,000 followers. One of the memes got picked up by a popular fitness repost account. Sales of the bar jumped by 40% that week. The client was ecstatic. That $500 felt like $1 million. Word spread. Another brand, then another. All scrappy, underdog companies with no marketing budget, but a lot of hustle. I started freelancing under a name I scribbled down on a sticky note. Meme Lord Media. It sounded dumb, but it was memorable. By month 2, I was booked out with 5 clients. By month 4, I was hiring my first contractor, a graphic designer I found on Reddit. We worked out of my living room. I still couldn't afford an office, but I bought a whiteboard and filled it with ideas and deadlines. Amanda joked that our baby was going to be born into chaos. She wasn't wrong. Our daughter, Ellie, was born in December. I held her in my arms while answering client messages. I hadn't taken a day off in 3 months. Sleep was optional. Every campaign I ran was a gamble. Sometimes they flopped. Sometimes they exploded. One campaign I made, a fake feud between 2 fictional gym bros, went viral on TikTok and pulled in 1.2 million views in 3 days. The client's pre-orders sold out. By the end of the year, I'd made $74,000. Still less than what I earned in corporate life. But it was mine. The turning point came when a popular YouTuber met our business account. He'd seen one of our parody ads and wanted help rebranding his channel for a new series. We charged $3,000. He paid instantly. He gave us a shout out in a video that got over 4 million views. Overnight, our inbox blew up. I had to hire 3 people within a week. I promoted the graphic designer to creative director. We launched a website. Meme Lord Media stopped being a joke. Our niche became viral content with teeth. Not just random TikToks, but storytelling that punched through noise. We built campaigns for indie brands, YouTubers, podcasters, even a few politicians trying to look relatable. Those were weird. We priced our packages at $5,000 minimum. We had waiting lists. 2 years in, I took a deep breath and signed a lease on an office space. It wasn't glamorous, industrial carpet and flickering lights, but it was ours. I hung our logo, still a pixelated meme frog wearing sunglasses, on the door. One day, I was walking into that office when a man stopped me in the hallway. He ran a small e-commerce brand and had heard about us through some local startup network. I gave him a tour, introduced him to the team, and handed him a free consultation. He became our biggest client. His company tripled in size. He ended up acquiring a stake in Meme Lord Media and investing in a joint content studio we launched in Austin. That partnership helped us scale to 20 employees and seven-figure revenue within 18 months. But here's the thing I never expected. The memes, the parody, the viral chaos. They all taught me how to tell stories people actually care about. That's what this business became. Not just marketing, not just content, but story. Scrappy, raw, honest stories that cut through noise. Every client we worked with had the same problem. Nobody was listening. The world is loud, and attention is fleeting. We gave them a way to be heard. Now, I speak at marketing conferences. We've been featured in Forbes, Adweek, and, ironically, LinkedIn's top viral agencies to watch. I laugh every time I see that. Amanda and I bought our first home last year. Ellie just turned 4. She thinks my job is making funny pictures on the computer. She's not wrong. People ask me all the time how I knew this would work. The truth is, I didn't. I just kept showing up. I said yes to a random DM. I made something dumb over and over until it worked. You don't have to be a genius. You don't have to have a perfect plan. You just have to be too stubborn to quit and just clever enough to make someone laugh. That's all I did. And I'd do it all again. I never expected my life to change the way it did. What started as a side hustle during my college days turned into a full-blown business that I never even dreamed could be so successful. But looking back, there were signs, moments that told me I was heading down this path. I just never saw it coming. It all started when I was 20, a sophomore at a small university. I was studying business because, well, it seemed like the obvious choice. My parents had always pushed me toward entrepreneurship, but I wasn't sure how it would fit into my life. One day, during a particularly boring economics lecture, I found myself scrolling through Reddit, yes, I know, and stumbled across a post about a side hustle that had gained traction on Etsy. The post was about making and selling custom-designed phone cases. Now, at this point, I hadn't considered anything in the realm of entrepreneurship, but the idea of creating something on my own that people would pay for sparked something inside me. I didn't know much about design, but I had always been good with tech and learning things on my own. That night, I stayed up researching how to design phone cases and what tools were needed to create high-quality prints. I started with basic designs, simple graphics, quotes, and patterns. Nothing too extravagant, but I believed in it. I ordered some blank cases and got to work, printing my designs on them using a cheap heat press I bought online. The first sale came 3 months later. I remember the moment I got that notification from Etsy. You have made a sale. I almost couldn't believe it. I had sold a phone case for $12.50. But that moment, that small victory, was the push I needed to really dive into this side hustle. I spent all my free time after classes refining my designs, experimenting with new ideas, and improving the quality of my work. Every few weeks, I would release a new collection of designs, hoping to catch the eye of someone browsing online. The more I learned, the more I understood the importance of marketing. I started posting on social media, Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook, wherever I could. Slowly, I gained a small but loyal following. By my senior year, I had about 300 followers on Instagram and a couple dozen sales each month. It wasn't much, but it was enough for me to believe that I could actually make something of this. Graduation day came, and like so many others, I felt the pressure of finding a real job. But I had this business, this tiny Etsy store that kept growing, albeit slowly. Most of my classmates were interviewing for corporate jobs in finance, marketing, or tech, but I knew I wasn't ready to let go of this dream. So, I did what anyone in my position would do. I took a gamble. I decided to not pursue a traditional job. Instead, I poured every bit of my energy into growing my Etsy shop and turning it into a full-time business. I faced a lot of challenges, though. In the beginning, I struggled with the unpredictability of sales. Some months, I'd have 1 sale. Other months, I'd have 20. There were days when I thought about quitting. The overhead was high with the costs of supplies and shipping, and I was constantly wondering if I was wasting my time. But every time I thought about giving up, I reminded myself of the small wins, the little milestones I had reached, and how far I had come. Then came the turning point. About a year into running the business full-time, I got a message from an influencer with 50K followers. She wanted to collaborate on a limited edition phone case line, showcasing my designs on her social media. I almost fell out of my chair when I read the message. I had never even thought about working with influencers, but this opportunity could change everything. We worked together for a few weeks, designing a line of cases that would go live on her Instagram. When the collaboration launched, it was like a bomb went off. The sales exploded. Within a week, I sold more cases than I had in the past 2 months combined. The exposure from her post brought hundreds of new customers to my shop, and my Instagram following grew by over 1,000 people in just a few days. That was the moment I knew I had made the right decision. This side hustle had officially become my full-time business, and the possibilities were endless. Over the next few years, I expanded the business beyond phone cases. I started offering custom laptop skins, tablet covers, and even personalized home decor items. I hired a small team of designers and fulfillment staff to help keep up with the growing demand. I also moved the business off Etsy and launched my own website, which gave me more control over branding and sales. As the business grew, I started investing in better equipment and higher quality materials. I also began attending trade shows and networking events to connect with other entrepreneurs and potential collaborators. But the real game changer came when I expanded into international markets. I began shipping globally, starting with Europe and Australia. The international sales were a huge boost to the business, and the word began to spread. At one point, we had a customer base in over 30 countries. I'd like to say it was all smooth sailing from there, but growth comes with its own set of challenges. Managing customer service, keeping track of inventory, and dealing with shipping delays in various countries became complicated. But I had learned to tackle obstacles head-on, always looking for ways to improve and scale. By year 5, my business was doing over 6 figures in annual revenue. I had more orders than I could manage, but I was also enjoying the fruits of my labor. My team was solid, and we had streamlined operations to the point where I could focus on the creative side of the business. It felt surreal to see the progress we had made. Looking back to that $12.50 phone case I sold in my dorm room, I could hardly believe how far we had come. Now, after over a decade of running the business, we're a well-known brand in the custom accessories market with a loyal customer base, and I've even expanded into creating collaborations with larger retailers. But no matter how big the company has gotten, I still remember those early days, the late nights spent designing in my tiny apartment, the doubt I felt when the sales were slow, and the excitement I had when the first sale came through. I'll be the first to admit, it wasn't easy. Entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. There were many sleepless nights, setbacks, and moments when I doubted myself. But there was also a lot of joy, satisfaction, and pride in creating something from nothing. If I could offer one piece of advice to anyone considering taking the leap, it would be this: keep going, even when it feels like you're not getting anywhere. Progress is often slow, but persistence and a willingness to adapt are what will set you apart. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.